Thank you everyone for joining us today for our first Top 3 in 30 webinar. It's provided for you by the Delaware National Estuarine Research Reserve. The Delaware National Estuarine Research Reserve is managed by DNREC's Division of Climate, Coastal, and Energy and is part of a national network of reserves funded by NOAA. My name is Lynn Pusey, and I'm the Training and Engagement Coordinator for the Reserve's Coastal Training Program. Today's webinar is PFAS in Delaware. I have a few quick housekeeping items to go over, and then we'll jump right in. So first of all, let's see, next slide here. Oh, nope, it didn't work. I'll stop sharing then. That would happen. There it is. Okay, so if you are interested in subtitles during today's presentation, you can do so using the icon at the bottom of your screen with the CC in it and the label Show Captions. All participants are muted for this webinar. If you have questions during the presentation, please place those in the chat box. We will not be raising hands for verbal questions during the webinar, but I will be monitoring the chat and we'll go through questions at the end of the presentation. Today's webinar is being recorded. A copy of that recording will be made available to you afterwards and will be placed on the Coastal Training Program website. Okay, let's jump in. Today's Top 3 in 30 webinar will be presented by Todd Kaiser from the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control and Amanda Lacklen from the Department of Health and Social Services. Thank you, Todd and Amanda, for joining us today. I'm going to stop now to allow Todd to share his screen, and I'll give Todd and Amanda the opportunity to take over, tell you a little bit more about themselves and about PFAS in Delaware.
Thank you, Lynn. Can you see the screen at this point, the presentation?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. Great. We'll get started. Amanda, please.
All right. Hello. As Lynn said, I'm Amanda Lacklen. I'm the Senior Environmental Scientist for the Office of Environmental Hazards and Toxicology within the Division of Public Health, and co-presenting with me today for the first ever top 3 in 30 minutes is
Todd Kaiser. I'm a hydrologist in DNREC's Division of Waste and Hazardous Substances. Thank you so much for having us here and letting us start off this series. We're very excited to be here to talk about PFAS in Delaware. We're going to go through and talk about a lot of different topics, but then focus on our top 3 things we want you to take away from this. So I'll get started here. So what are PFAS? PFAS are per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. They're human-made chemicals. They've been in use since the 1940s. They're of interest because they're an emerging contaminant. So what does that mean? It means that the knowledge about these particular contaminants is ever-changing, ever-growing, and a lot of research is occurring right now. Also discovering the challenges of how many different places PFAS exist and how they move through different pathways and interact with us and impact our lives. So in general, they're a group of chemicals used to make coatings that resist heat, oil, stains, grease, and water. Very, very widespread use in consumer and industrial products, nonstick coatings, firefighting foams, waterproofing, stain resistant, fast food wrappers, and personal care products. And we'll go through some of those detailed as we talk about our top 3 and things we want you to understand about this. There are over 15,000 different PFAS compounds. Some of them you're quite well known. Some of them aren't. PFOS, PFOA, these are the chemical acronyms, and then Gen X. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But some confusion comes about what the acronyms actually mean. And you've probably seen in the past, as the science was developing, as press was coming out, particularly related to these compounds, PFCs, PFAs, PFAAs, all of these are subsets to this larger group of per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. It's the all-encompassing acronym. PFOA, PFOS, Gen X, they're types of PFAS. So I just want to make sure that when we talk about PFAS, we're talking about the 15,000 of them as a large group. But then there are individual names, individual compounds that we'll detail later that we want to just talk about and discuss a little bit. So just want to make sure we're all on the same page about that. So what makes these compounds unique? They are a chain of linked carbon and fluorine atoms, and it's one of the strongest bonds ever created. That's great when it's going to be a product that's employed in very difficult situations to face sort of challenging topics, but it's really a bad topic when it starts being exposed to us to the environment, to our animals, to foods and plants. So it's got an acronym or a moniker of a forever chemical. And we've debate whether or not, how do we comprehend forever? The idea behind that is it's a persistent compound. It's going to last a long time in the environment. So it also bioaccumulates. So what does that mean? It means that most living things, 97% of Americans from the CDC quote from 2012, have some degree of PFAS in their body. It accumulates mostly in blood. Amanda will speak a little bit to it later. But as it bioaccumulates, it also has toxic characteristics. It's doing harm. So we want to understand a lot about how these compounds exist within the environment, within us, and then what we can do. That's going to be one of our takeaways. So we really like presenting this cartoon here. In this cartoon, we talk about how PFAS moves through the environment. And because it's persistent, it doesn't break down. So we think about air pollution. Air comes up, comes down in precipitation, can get into any number of different situations where we then could be exposed to it either through a surface water body that we drink, fish we consume from that surface water body. And you see through this cartoon how it just continues to cycle through. So we've said before, PFAS are everywhere. That's a reasonable statement, but it just exists in different degrees, different types. And as we do research across the state, we're starting to understand that a little bit better. But if you want to take this away, that PFAS can be in a bunch of different situations in the environment and in your home. So this next one speaks to a lot of the investigations that you depict in the cartoon of how it cycles through. Here's how DNREC and DHSS, specifically Department of Public Health, have been working to sample for PFAS in the environment. We're looking at air. We're looking at individual hazardous substance cleanup sites. We're looking at groundwater wells, both public and private. Excuse me. We're also looking at some existing monitoring networks of wells to determine if PFAS are present along with other compounds that were of interest to us, such as pesticides, metals, nitrates, other things. Putting all that information together helps us understand how things cycle through the environment and to what degree and how they may change. So they'll persist, but they won't necessarily break down into something that's innocuous. It may change to another PFAS compound. One of the big issues and big topics we're looking at right now are biosolids and wastewater. And just want to mention, if you go to the de.gov/PFAS page, there's extensive research, extensive reporting that we've done as multiple agencies to show exactly where we've sampled, the results we're getting, and then how we're linking all of these things together in that cycling cartoon perspective. So I want you to see that there's so much work going on, put it together. All of this is available to the public, and we want you to understand it. I'll pass it off to Amanda here.
Thank you, Todd. So Todd just went through where we have detected PFAS, kind of our methods of looking around our outdoor environment for where they are. So this was a study done by the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, also known as ATSDR. It's a branch of the CDC. This was conducted in Newcastle County, Delaware, to look at PFAS in various types of media, which I will go into in a second. But the biggest takeaway from this study was that they looked at blood, urine, dust, water, and soil. And their biggest takeaway was that the PFAS that are in people's home dust in their household was also found in their blood, which means that there is a pathway of correlation. Next slide, please. And so right now it's estimated to be 20% of our exposure to PFAS comes from drinking water. 20% after this study is assumed to come from inhalation and breathing it in. So most of our efforts are trying to decide where else is it? Where's the other 60% of exposure coming from, and how can we avoid it? That is one of our biggest takeaways, is how can we reduce exposure to PFAS? So this is a study that was conducted in 2019, and I'm very proud of the Division of Public Health because we are pressing forward with mimicking this study in Kent, Sussex County, Delaware. This study will be launched in 2026. And so we're going to mimic this and take it a step further by looking at the isomers of the certain PFAS. That was something that was not captured in the first study, and we're going to expand on that. Next slide, please. So this is a product that my team created to try and give people a starting place, because if this is your first day hearing about PFAS, I'm sorry that it's overwhelming, but it's better to know and know how to avoid it. So I usually start, we bring this to outreach events so that people can just kind of get eyes on it. On the bottom right, there's a pair of shoes. The easiest way to reduce exposure from outside PFAS, bringing them into your house, is to take your shoes off before you go into your house. This is very hard for me, but if you already have this habit, you're a step ahead of me. Other things that you're already going to be doing, like changing your HVAC air filters, or if you have an air purifier, changing out those filters on a regular basis, that can help reduce your exposure. Wet cleaning methods in your house to make sure that you're not kicking up more dust while you're cleaning. Looking at the products that you're using, I'll go into that in the next slide, but making sure that they don't have PFAS in them, making sure that you're using safe products that are not exposing you to more PFAS. Your cookware, cast iron, stainless steel, and ceramic cookware is the best to not further expose you to PFAS or contaminate your food while you're cooking it. Storing your food, also trying to make sure that it's in glass, ceramic, or some kind of metal container, something that doesn't include PFAS. Fast food, I eat fast food, but when I take it home, I try to take it out of the container just because I don't know if there's PFAS or not in the wrapper. So these are all little things that you can do. Washing your bedding. One product I would like to highlight is dental floss. Dental floss has been found to have PFAS in it, but they do make a carbon-based dental floss that is made out of bamboo. It's biodegradable. It's better for the planet, better for us. Next slide, please. So again, we're going back into the products. If you want to take a screenshot of this, or it'll be recorded. But there are just some things to avoid because there are PFAS in products and it's not always revealed to you. As the consumer, you do have the power to reach out to a company and say, are there PFAS in here? And if they say, well, there's no PFOA, well, that's 1 out of 15,000. Press them for more answers. Over on the right side, you can see, try to avoid products that have fluoro, perfluoro, or any of these items listed in the label. Next slide, please. This is also a fact sheet that came out of ATSDR that my team recreated so that people could get a snapshot of which specific PFAS are related to which health effect. So just looking at it, decreased birth weight has been proven to be associated with PFOA and PFOS. So this is something that I will speak about in the blood comparison. But these are things to look out for if you have tested your blood, or if you've tested your water, if you've tested anything and you know you have a high level of PFAS. These are things that you should be screened for. Next slide, please. So this is what I was talking about with the expansion of the new research study. These are isomers. Isomers are the same chemical compound, but set up in a different orientation. So on the left is PFOA. This is a linear isomer of PFOA. And then the two on the right are branched. And as you can see, they are branched at different places. So PFOA has 38 unique branched isomers. PFOS has 87. On top of there being 15,000 different PFAS, we got a lot of isomers too. Next slide, please. So this is, sorry if the bottom part's a little cut off. You might not see the dots. So the white paper, this is a 9-panel blood test of a 70-year-old woman that lives in Delaware. This was from 2024. If you can look up at the top right where it says result and then 3.21, this is her NACEM summation of all the PFAS for the 9 that were detected. So that, I'll get back to that in a second. I want you to look at the linear PFOA and branch PFOA. They tested for both of these isomers and they bioaccumulated at different rates. So the linear bioaccumulated at 1.19, whereas the branch wasn't detected. And then if you venture down further, linear PFOS was at 0.062 and the branch was at 0.26. So again, bioaccumulating at different rates, this was something that confused me because I would think branch is bigger, it would get stuck. Back to the health effects, over to the right side. If you're under 2 nanograms per milliliter, you're in the clear. If you are between 2 and 20, you want to screen for those health effects. If you're over 20, you definitely want to look for those health effects. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to speak as fast as I can. The bottom gray is this woman's water test results. Those are taken in parts per trillion, whereas blood results are in parts per billion. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Amanda. I think that's a great lead in here. We talk about all the different exposure pathways and the ones we're spending a lot of time and attention on, that 20% exposure route of drinking water. So one of the projects we're working on, and many of you on this call here on this webinar have a private well. So we looked at within the state, where are the private wells? Basically about 20% or 200,000 of the residents within the state of Delaware have their own private well. We looked at the clusters of this and said, these are places where public water systems are not as prevalent and individuals are sort of responsible for their own water quality once their wells put in. So that became part of our scope of work when we started looking at creating a private well program. We did follow-up sampling in private wells after we discovered PFAS in some public water systems from the sampling we did in 2019. It was the first time we started working together really aggressively at DNREC and DHSS. Initially, we were looking at a 70 nanogram per liter part per trillion as a threshold value. For those that have been paying attention, to know those numbers have been dropping through time. So emerging science also brings up the concept of emerging and changing thresholds. So we identified areas with potential sources, done some private well sampling around those to ensure that if we knew of a detection in a public system, we were also addressing some of those private wells. That work is ongoing. We've discovered about 48 different areas within the state that we're doing follow-up work. And as we do this work, some of the context we want to bring to the investigation is, if you have a private well, do you also have a private septic? Coming back to the cartoon, septic systems can be sources of PFAS to the groundwater. That's something that we looked at that cartoon. Everything cycles through, and all the products that you use in your home, you're exposed to, that can get into a septic. We ask questions about how do you actually use the water in your home? Many people don't actually use their well water for cooking or for consumption. So we wanted to go through and say, well, let's sample for you. And from that, give you a better idea of what's actually in your water and see what the right mitigative actions could be. So if you already have filters in place, we look at the concept of how long have they been in place? What do they actually do? Do you service them? I've been really sort of amazed by how many people said, well, I put this system in 10 years ago and haven't touched it since. That's challenging. It's not necessarily working anymore. Collecting data that helps us inform what the next right steps would be, specifically for PFAS, but then also working with DPH, looking at some standard drinking water parameters, chemical and bacteriological. So we have a larger data set on how to make some good decisions. When we look at where we're sampling, we look at environmental factors. And then again, coming back to the concept of products in your home. So your exposure to PFAS can be through the environment generally, or through your home and the purchases you make, the things you use in your own home. So when we take a sample through our private well program, we provide that individual data back to the homeowner to say, here you are, we took samples, here are the results. And we're fortunate at this point to be able to use some federal funding and also some state funding to pay for that private well sampling for PFAS, the chemical and bacteriological analysis. We also are able to provide point of use filtration just to short-term mitigate that if there's a detection above our action levels. Our action levels, we determine them to be the same thing as the public drinking water system maximum contaminant levels, the MCLs, the regulatory thresholds. So Amanda, you could talk a little bit, please, about some of the results from DPH.
Yes, and I will talk fast. Shout out to the Delaware Public Health Lab. They have been great partners, and this is an example of a bacteriological result where total coliforms is present. You can see on the bottom, I've highlighted in pink, water sample does not conform to drinking water standards. Next slide, please. All right, so this is an example where it is absent. So this result does conform to drinking water standards. Next slide, please. In the last few months, they have combined them. So now the chemical and bacteriological are together. This result does not conform to drinking water standards, which was a little cut off on the page, but it's because total coliforms is present. But you can see on the left, this is what either chemical or bacteriological agent is being tested for. The result is in the middle. The reference range is the MCL, if there is one, and then the date that it was conducted. Next slide, please. So all this to say, and I'm going to try and go through this so we can have time for questions. We know that we don't want to absorb PFAS into our body. If we find out that it's in our water, and I encourage everybody on this call, if you have a private well, please go get your private well tested, contact us. We can do it for free. there's a lot of options. So if you're on a private well and it's shallow and you have contaminants, you can connect to a public water system. There are grants and funding opportunities for that. If you could also dig a deeper well, at least in Kent, Sussex County, if you are under 200 feet in depth, there is a very likely chance that you will not have PFAS contamination. You could also provide filtration, but this can be expensive, especially if you have a higher level of PFAS in your drinking water. But the bottom right is a granular activated carbon device. That is a GAC filter that can take out PFAS. Reverse osmosis is great. There's other ion exchange resins. And then a lot of the public water systems are trying to address this in public drinking water. Next slide, please.
So we'll talk briefly about the 2022 sampling of public water systems statewide. We sampled all of the raw water. So that's water pre-treatment. We have results back from that, and taking a look at the state overall, Newcastle County has a higher predominance of raw water with PFAS in it above our action levels. There are some places in Kent and Sussex County with former industrial operations or commercial operations where impact has been there. All of this information was shared with the public water systems at the time of the sampling and started moving towards, to Amanda's point, addressing through technical assistance and funding with the understanding that MCLs were coming, maximum contaminant levels, regulatory standards that need to be put into place. We provided assistance to all these systems, and we're still in the midst of doing that. We were bolstered through that effort by Senate Bill 72, which basically says, should a public water system sample for PFAS and be above the medium orange center there, those are the MCL numbers. If they're above, they have to notify the public. And we have to move together towards making sure the public's notified about this information, starting of January 15th of 2026. They have to start mitigating it. They have to have a sample of their system no matter what by the middle of 2027, and then be in compliance by 2029. So again, this is multiple pathways. Private well, we have an assistance program. Public water systems, we have assistance programs in place and regulatory standards that are popping up. So we wanted to share with you, these are the top 3 and 30 PFAS in Delaware. Amanda, if you wouldn't mind taking us through here.
Yes, so, and we're crunching on time. So PFAS can be found in both natural and human-made materials. So inside, outside, the best thing we can do is acknowledge them, figure out where they are, what levels they are, and how we can stop the exposure routes, which is our next point. As a community or as a household or as an individual, you can identify the exposure routes, take steps to eliminate or reduce those exposure routes. So if you're filtering your drinking water, you're reducing your exposure. If you're buying products that don't have PFAS in them, you're reducing your exposure. And by reducing all of these, you can do this by reading product labels, being informed about what you're purchasing, what you're consuming, what you're surrounded by, and how items in your household that might not be necessary. I usually compare it to a catheter has PFAS in it, but it's necessary. We need catheters. Waterproof mascara, some of you might disagree. We don't need that. We're not going to, perish if we don't have waterproof mascara. So these are our 3 top 3 and 30 minutes PFAS in Delaware items. And also the constant research and innovation around these topics is ever changing. So thank you for taking the time today to learn a little bit, listen to us, and we will take questions in a second. If Todd, you want to go to the next slide? This
Absolutely.
is our contact information. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Todd and Amanda. I was notified that it looks like the chat was not working for everybody at first. So I think it should be available now. So my apologies if you were trying to submit a question and we're having trouble. Hopefully it should be working now. So that being said, nothing's popping up at the moment, but in the meantime, I had a question that I wanted to pose. Amanda, you had talked about screening for isomers and health effects. How would someone go about getting that screening done if they were interested?
So you can, I know Quest Diagnostics is doing blood samples. There was also a rural study out of Nevada that was offering it for free. So it was a mail-at-home blood test that people could prick their finger and send it back, and then it would tell you your levels. It can be expensive. That was the only free study I've heard of. The ones that are going to be done in Kent, Sussex County will be random, and it will be near an already known PFAS site. So I think looking for free blood tests could be an option. They do come up every once in a while. And just keeping your eyes open. If you have the money to pay for it, you can contact a blood testing lab to ask for that. They might get a little confused if you say you want the isomer differentiation, but bring me in. I'll talk to them too.
Okay, thank you. Todd, a quick question for you. You had mentioned getting your private well tested. If someone wanted to get their private well tested, who would they contact for that? How would that process work?
So currently the best way to contact either DNREC or DPH is through our website, our de.gov/PFAS webpage. The contact information is there for us. We are expanding that within the next couple of months. And through that, we're going to make it a much easier access form where all the information can come in. We're going to be able to ramp up some of that offering that we're doing right now. We've been doing this for several years at this point. It'll be much more organized, much more simpler. But right now, keep looking on that webpage. And once that's launched at a grander scale, we'll also do a press release so everyone understands what's going on.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. And I think Amanda also put that link in the chat. So there is a link to the PFAS website there. And after this webinar, once we get the recording set up, I will be sending a follow-up email to everyone who registered that includes this recording and then any additional resource links, including that PFAS webpage. If there's, and Amanda and Todd, we had talked about this previously, but any fact sheets that were included in the presentation that we can also send, we'll go ahead and attach those to that email so that folks can take a kind of a deeper dive after today. Okay, so any other questions? The chat is open. I'm going to give just another minute or so to allow people to drop their questions in that chat if they're interested. In the meantime, I do want to say thank you to Todd and Amanda for taking the time to talk with us today. This is a really big topic that is very important. And so I appreciate both of you taking the time to provide us with all of this information and the resources. So I'm going to, okay, here is one more question in the chat. We do still have 2 minutes. So a question, were there any tests done on city water?
So public water providers, some of them have had tests done. Todd got kicked out of the meeting, but he's trying to.
No, I am now back. I'm back.
Okay,
Here I
he's
am.
back in. Public water testing. It was the question. Where city water.
So yeah, in 2022, yeah, so 2022, we did sampling as DNREC of the public water systems that had unconfined aquifer wells. We had a certain amount of funding to be able to work with, and the plan was, well, where can we go to where we have the reasonable expectation that the unconfined aquifer could be impacted? Part of that also was potentially avoiding some confined aquifer wells. We also have done statewide surface water sampling. The surface water bodies in Newcastle County that are used for public drinking water systems have been extensively sampled. All of that information is shared. So the context of this would be, how does someone know what PFAS are in their water or not? Is that the question?
The question was, were there any tests done on city water?
So I live up in Newcastle County. So city to me is Wilmington. Yes. But what other cities could we be thinking about? I'm standing down in Dover right now. Yes, they've sampled in Dover. So yes, there's been extensive sampling through the larger public water systems across the state.
Okay. Great, thank you. Well, we are at time. So thank you for the questions in the chat. I am going to drop a link in the chat right now. And I'm going to ask everyone who's here to go ahead and click on that link, make sure it opens for you. While you're doing that, just as a reminder to anyone who might have checked our website, next month's webinar will be at 2 p.m. on Thursday, March 19th. It will be on floodplain management in your town. That link that I dropped in the chat, which hopefully is opening for everybody, is our survey for today's webinar. We would love to hear some feedback from you. Before you head off to your next activity, just take a few minutes. It's only 3 questions. Your input will help us determine the format and content of future webinars and trainings that we are able to provide from our coastal training program with the Delaware National Estuarine Research Reserve. So with that, that is all we have for today. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks, Todd and Amanda, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.